After 20 years of planning, OSIRIS-REx collected some samples from the surface of an asteroid on Tuesday night in a magnificent feat of engineering and science.
Yep, the tag team did an incredible job. But we're also going to have a chat about space junk, and I know what you're wondering. Has Emily watched The Right Stuff?
You'll find out later. Please do get in touch and let us know your thoughts about what we're doing. We're at Space and Things 1 on Twitter, or tag us at Space and Things Podcast on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, please do. And maybe get a t-shirt or a hoodie on our website, spaceandthingspodcast.com. But for now, we're hoping to entertain you with episode 8 of the Space and Things podcast.
You're listening to the Space and Things podcast with Emily Carney and Dave Giles.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles. And welcome to episode 8 of our podcast. I'm super excited right now. It's Tuesday night as we're recording this, and we've just watched this wonderful mission come to, well, not a conclusion, but one of the key parts of it come to a conclusion with the sample being collected. We're going to talk more about it later, but both of us are buzzing.
Yeah, that was just like the best natural high I've gotten in a long time. That was just wonderful. There's just been so much, obviously there's been so much difficulty this last year, just worldwide. I don't know. I don't want to be negative, but there's, just a lot of not pleasant situations going on in this, just to see this, and not just OSIRIS-REx, succeeding like this, but, just everything else in space flight in this year. For me, and I'm sure you as well, it's just been so inspiring, and it's been very uplifting and moving.
Absolutely. So we will talk more about that later. But yeah, right now I am on cloud 9, and it's a good feeling. It's a very, very good feeling. But anyway, let's get on with the show.
Okay, we're off to a good start. Play it cool.
So yeah, another crazy week in space. I know last week I said that we'd talk about the changing of the crew on the International Space Station, but we will focus on that next week as we count down to 20 years of continuous human presence on the station. But in brief, last week, the Soyuz MS-17 spacecraft, carrying 2 Russians and an American, launched, and it made it to the space station in record time, just 3 hours, which is twice as fast as normal. And I can't help but think that Russia wanted to remind us that they do space quite well. And with all the hype of the Crew Dragon launch this year and all the US scrubs that have happened recently, I think it was a bit of a media win for them, that one little thing. But it may have been overlooked, but it was definitely them flexing their muscles a little bit. But on Tuesday, the Expedition 63 crew passed over command to the new crew, and they left the space station yesterday. And they are now back on Earth. But we'll discuss that mission more next week, because there's just too much to go through.
Yeah, next week, as Dave said, will be the 20th anniversary of continuous human occupation on the International Space Station. With OSIRIS-REx, with that happening this week, and we're also going to get into some other potentially interesting news that, almost happened this week that could have been bad. We'll talk a little bit about that. And it was just a little too much. We didn't want to give y'all a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have not been fun, maybe for a lot of you. So, so we're going to do that next week, and we'll also try to provide some historical context of space stations from the past, including Skylab, Mir, Salyut space stations, you name it. So space stations, we got them, and we'll be talking about them.
Yep, next week. All good. But yeah, as Emily said last week on Friday, Leo Labs Incorporated, I think that's what the Inc. stands for. I'm going to go with that. Let's just say Leo Labs Inc., a company which tracks space debris, reported that there could have been a big collision between a defunct Russian satellite and a piece of an old Chinese rocket. The internet went a bit crazy about this as we all waited for the news as whether they had hit or not, or whether they had collided or not. But fortunately, they didn't. And that is very much fortunately, as the objects had a combined mass of more than 2.5 tons and a relative velocity of 33,800 miles per hour. And had they have collided, there would have been all kinds of problems with debris flying everywhere in all directions. And that could have caused a lot of problems for operational satellites and perhaps even the space station. So it's good that they didn't obviously collide. And a lot of chat has happened since this happened. Even Mike Collins has been tweeting about it and tweeting articles about it, which has been fun. But the CEO of Rocket Lab, the New Zealand rocket company, he had quite a thing to say about it. And he even's been saying that with all the items that are in low Earth orbit at the moment, it's actually getting difficult to plan new launches, as you got to try and weave your rocket through all of these items, which is pretty crazy. And of course, SpaceX then launched 60 more Starlink satellites on Sunday. It may appear that Scrubtober is over in Florida, but there's certainly a lot of stuff up there at the moment which we need to probably have a little chat about.
Yeah, I've had a few people actually request that we discuss space junk. And given what happened last week on Friday, I definitely think that's a timely topic.
Yeah.
And as you said, even Mike Collins, I've seen him tweeting about it, and I'm like, you got to think about, I don't want to call Mike Collins old because I think he's ageless, but you got to think, back when he was around, my age, he was probably late 30s, early 40s or whatever. There was comparatively little space junk compared to what we got now. So I'm sure, I know he saw their S4B tumbling away, and they probably thought, wow, that's huge. That's a big piece of junk up there. It's probably a completely different story now. I'm thinking if those two pieces actually had collided, I want to say, how many meters were they within each other? Like 25 that's something nuts.
That's what they reported. They thought it was about 25 meters, which is, and bear in mind how big, space is big, and in the area above us is big. For them to get that close is really crazy.
Yeah, that's like the Earth equivalent of you're driving and you're on somebody, like right next to somebody's bumper. You are just about to hit them.
Yeah. So how did they not hit each other? But a couple of weeks ago, the ISS had to do a maneuver to avoid a collision as well with something potentially hazardous. This is becoming a thing that the crews are going to have to start dealing with on a more regular basis, which is worrying. And that's why we can't allow them to collide if we can avoid it, because that will just cause even more problems.
The ISS stuff to me is especially, it's frightening on a few levels because obviously there are actual people up there. Also, the ISS is really large. It's a very large. It's humongous. There's that fantasy part of me that wishes maybe I'll get a chance to go up there someday. Maybe they'll run out of people and they'll select me or something. But I can't imagine seeing it in photographs and kind of telling yourself, okay, that's about as big as a football field. Having, I try to imagine being, on a Soyuz or in a Dragon or on the shuttle or whatever, and just approaching it, and you're like, oh, okay, it's small from, oh my God, and as you close in, it gets huge. So that's a really big piece of machinery up there. And also, I believe the procedure for getting away, if the ISS is in threat of being hit by something, is they go into the Soyuz or the Dragon. They try to get the heck out of there, you know? That's kind of a contingency situation, and that's not really something you want to happen because, it requires the crew to possibly leave, and that they're going to have to leave a lot of experiments and a lot of stuff kind of, okay, we're just going, and a lot of things are not going to be finished or, kind of left in limbo for a while. So, it's generally not a desirable situation for anybody. So, and it's scary. I mean, I'm sure... I'm sure astronauts and space travelers are made of something a little different than I am. They're probably, trained to deal with that stuff, and they're probably very calm. But the idea of, okay, something is pointed at us and it's not going to miss is to me is oh my God, I would be terrified. So it's frightening on many levels. Yeah,
I mean, there's at the Space Center in Houston, they've got a whole section of pieces of material that they've brought back from the space station that have had impacts just from tiny little particles that are floating around, and the damage that those tiny things caused. They've got something similar at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum as well, where they've got I think it's the old Hubble mirror or something to do with Hubble, something they brought back from Hubble. And again, it's covered in specs that They're not specks, but these are from tiny collisions or collisions with tiny things, which have caused quite a lot of damage. And that's just the tiniest of objects. So, there's a lot that needs to happen here. Interestingly, some home news, the UK Space Agency in May commissioned quite a large project to look more closely at space junk. And they've commissioned 7 companies and given them all, I think, £1 million each to develop some more technology to make sure we're observing this. And ESA the European Space Agency, have a launch plan for 2025 for a mission called Clear Space 1, which is the first mission to hopefully clear some space junk. And I understand that the European Space Agency are certainly trying hard to think about how to help resolve this problem that they've got, this growing problem which is happening up there.
I don't want to sound like I'm dissing NASA here, especially after what just happened a few minutes ago, which was incredible. But I think the European Space Agency, as always, they're very forward-thinking. And I'm sure, NASA and I think every space agency probably in the world looks, at least with involvement, where they have objects in space, they are looking at this and try to keep track of everything in space. And I know there's agencies that really track, deorbiting objects, what's going to come down next. There's a gentleman on Twitter who I follow, and he's a friend of mine, and he's really cool, and I think everybody should follow him on Twitter, but his name is Jonathan McDowell. Okay. He's I believe, an astrophysicist. If I'm wrong, Jonathan, if you're listening, please yell at me on Twitter. But he also has a website, I believe, and we'll try to put it in the we'll link to that. But we'll put it in the show notes. But he has a website that catalogs a lot of space objects and launches and stuff like that. So if you're interested in looking at all these things, it's definitely his website is something to check out. He's probably one of the biggest world experts on that. When this went down with the 2 objects last week, his Twitter account was the first place I went to, because I was like, okay, I know I'm going to get the right information from him.
Yeah.
And within moments, he put up the tweet from Leo Labs where they said, okay, it cleared, but still, I'll be honest, I stayed up to make... Not that it would have mattered if I'd gone to bed or not, but,
yeah.
Not like me staying up would have stopped it, but I did stay up because I was like, is this going to happen or not? Because I don't want to wake up tomorrow and it's like, dude, there's like thousands and thousands of little pieces in low Earth orbit. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, nobody had that on their bingo card for 2020. We didn't have a lot of stuff on our bingo card, but that was another thing I did not add on there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Giant space collision. So
there was that great period where it went out of radio contact for 10 to 15 minutes, and it was like everyone was waiting to find out when it came back in, if they were still intact or whether they had collided. But then that tweet went up, said, looks like there's not been a collision, and everyone was like, oh, okay, well, that was a little bit of an anticlimax, but at least the positive story.
Yeah, exactly. I could go to bed finally. Yeah. I think once I saw that tweet, I was like, okay, I can take my melatonin and fall asleep now. Thank you.
Hey, Emily, maybe this is part of your curse. But the positive side of it, when you stay awake for these things, you prevent the collisions. So in future, if there's going to be a near miss, you need to stay awake. Otherwise, from now on,
I can't go to bed.
You can't go to
sleep.
It'll
be like 5 a.m. Can't go to bed.
Yeah,
you got to on a weeknight. Can't go to sleep. You be up for like 36 hours. Yep. Maybe that's the opposite side of the curse. Well, Starlink did go, and I didn't watch it, so that's why it went.
Yeah, exactly. The second of the Falcon 9 rockets to have had 6 successful liftoffs and landings, which is still, it just still blows my mind that they're doing that. I know it's regular. I know there's going to be another one this week, apparently, weather permitting or other things permitting. There's one planned for the next week. So another 60 satellites. Yeah,
I hate saying this word because I don't consider launch operations... I don't consider any launches routine because, whenever you're sending stuff to space, it should not be considered routine. I don't want to jinx nothing, but they make it look so easy. Like
Yeah.
it looks so effortless. Like, yeah, we just launched something and landed it. Like, I feel like the dream, this guy is one of my heroes, so I give him shout outs often. Like, the dream of people like Gerard K. O'Neill, who dreamt of, occupation in space and stuff like that. I feel like that's starting to get realized now with, SpaceX just, putting these vehicles up and Blue Origin and, all these different kind of private launch vendors. So I feel very encouraged.
It's another reason why we do have to keep this space junk thing in check, because if Starship, the next SpaceX development, if that happens as Elon wants it to, then that's going to be doing 5 or 6 journeys a day up there. I do love all the launches, and I love the fact there's like cool stuff going on, but people do need to be paying attention to this stuff about what is up there. And
absolutely.
And it's weird because we now look at the night sky so completely different as well. We now have regular satellites which you can see. I mean, it used to be so rare to see a satellite going overhead, but now it's fairly regular. You can look up on a clear night and you'll see satellites.
Oh yeah. There's some fairly good satellite trackers, and I have one on my phone, and if you just go to like your app store and just type in satellite tracker, you should be able to find one or a few.
Yeah.
One time I got bored and it was like, in 5 minutes is, some kind of, God, I'm probably getting the name of the rocket stage incorrect, but it was like a Thor Agena rocket stage is passing over. And I'm like, what? They haven't been flying those in a while.
Yeah.
In about a hot minute. I'm like, does somebody have like those on standby somewhere? And then I realized it hasn't deorbited yet. It's still up there, and so I went outside and it was near dark, so it was like dusk, kind of like right before the sun goes down. And I looked, and sure enough, it was right in the direction. Like I saw this glint, and I was like, holy crap! It's very precise. You will, if you have your compass, you will see it in the correct direction if it's fairly clear out. So these are really good, and I highly suggest anybody who has like even a casual interest in space flight or space objects, if get one of these, and you can go out and view quite a few things, even spent rocket stages from the 60s. Yeah. So very cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. But anyway, let's crack on with to our main story, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Just before we started recording our podcast tonight, we were both glued to the NASA live feed as the OSIRIS-REx mission performed a tag or touch and go maneuver to collect a sample from the asteroid Bennu, I think is called. This is a mission that has been planned for 20 years, and it launched on an Atlas V 411 rocket over 4 years ago on September 8th, 2016. I think I watched the launch from my house, so I do remember this. It rendezvoused with the asteroid back in December 2018, so about 2 years ago. And it has spent the last 2 years in orbit, taking lots of photos of the surface to try and find a spot to take a sample from. Now, that kind of posed some challenges because the asteroid surface was a little different than expected. So, and also due to the low gravity of the asteroid, which is about as big as the Empire State Building, it's a challenge just to get a spacecraft in orbit, but even harder to collect a sample. Now, they couldn't land on the asteroid, but instead they devised a way to collect a sample on during a fly past or during a flyby. They gave themselves 3 chances to be able to do this, and this was the first attempt. So, God forbid it had it not worked, they would have had 2 more tries, but it worked. And as we record this, they've been successful with the contact, but we won't find out if they successfully got a sample for a few days. But if it didn't, it's good to know that it survived and they can at least have another go around. So in March next year, the craft should be in position to start its journey home, and it should be back here by 2023. And it will be the biggest sample return from space since 1972. Okay, marinate on how many years that's been.
Yeah,
okay?
Exactly.
That was when Apollo 17 returned from the moon. So let's talk about this. This is a game changer for many reasons. Dave, what do you think?
Wow, it was just so much fun, wasn't it? Was it not just so much fun seeing this?
Yes.
Do you know, I think what I really love about this stuff when this happens and watching the live streams is often you're not watching footage from it happening because they haven't quite got that bit yet with communications.
With data.
Also, all you're doing is watching the team sitting at their desks. This happens with Mars landings as well, obviously. And seeing the reaction of the team that have worked so hard on this just absolutely fills my heart with such joy when you see it and when it goes well. And the fact they did it first attempt, it was just wonderful to watch. And right as it ended, Emily, I think you turned off at this point, but there was a guy
did, unfortunately.
just signing off, and he passed on to someone else, but then they forgot to turn his mic off. And so it was on someone else and she was talking, but in the background you could hear this guy breathing heavily and composing himself and getting emotional as the weight of everything that had happened and all this work they'd done over the years comes to its conclusion. Well, not conclusion, as we said earlier, but this part of the mission comes to that point, and it worked. And you can't fathom how, when you're putting that much of your life into one project, that's crazy. And a few of them all mentioned a scientist called Michael Drake, who started. He was one of the scientists which started this project. And he died in 2011, and they were all keen to bring him up in the thing to say he'd be so happy right now. He'd be here with us celebrating. It's a shame he's not here. And the human impact of these kind of things happening just really gets me. And I was sitting here, I definitely had asteroid dust in my eyes. But the OSIRIS-REx, which I think is a beautiful name, by the way. I love the fact it's got a dinosaur vibe to it. It stands for Origins, Spectral Interpretation, Resource Identification, Security, Regolith Explorer, which is a wonderful way they've managed to turn that into a nice word.
Yes, a nice little acronym.
Yeah, beautiful acronym.
It's a really good one. I was thinking the same thing when I was watching it, because I was just watching everybody's reactions, and as the kind of the live cast, repeated, this is a long project, and planetary missions, or not even planetary missions, deep space missions with, space probes. Those are very long-term projects. A lot of people, I know you realize that, but I think a lot of people who are more casual space observers, and this is not to fault them or anything, because it's really hard unless you, do a lot of research on this stuff to realize, how many decades go into this, For example, like I have a friend of mine, Rachel Tillman, and she runs, I'm probably messing the name of it up. It's the Viking, basically the Viking Preservation Project, and it's about the Viking missions from the 70s, which some of you may remember. I remember them. But it was the first U.S. landers. There were 2 landers to land successfully on Mars. And Viking actually had roots in another project called Voyager, not the Voyager that we know, but it was supposed to be, it was a project where they were supposed to take Saturn V's, I'm not kidding, and launch, a giant Mars mission, an uncrewed Mars mission. Obviously, with budget cuts and NASA, that didn't happen, but this was proposed as early as the 60s. And if you look at, you do the math, Vikings didn't launch till 1975. So that took probably around almost a decade to develop, and that's really not a long time for a Mars mission. Now, this OSIRIS-REx has taken about 2 decades to develop. I know Rosetta, which was a European Space Agency mission, and some of you may remember it. It was amazing. Yeah. Where they landed a small probe, Philae, on Comet 67P. That took several decades to develop, and I think they actually had, if I'm not mistaken, I think they had to change targets at one point. They wanted to land one place I want to say they wanted to land on a different comet at one point, but that became impossible, so they had to select a different target. So these missions really take forever, and people who are in them for decades. So that to see the science team's reaction, to when they had that moment where, okay, it worked the way it was supposed to me, I was like, yeah, I had a little dust in my eyes. I was getting emotional, because I'm like, I know how important it is for this stuff to work. And granted, they have 2 more tries, so if it hadn't, it's not hopeless, but as I said earlier in the podcast, with all the sadness that has been happening this year and all the adversity we've all been going through this year, it's so wonderful to see something so positive and uplifting like that, where okay, we put a spacecraft on an asteroid and sampled it, and then the spacecraft flew away. I mean, that's like stuff you read about in like, science fiction books from the 40s or something, but no, it's real. It's real, and they just did it. So yeah, I'm still in that excitement mode. I apologize. People listening are probably just getting annoyed, but I'm just still like bubbling with excitement. And this is a project, that many that I've followed. I remember back, 7-8 years ago, I was writing about this project for America Space, and I'm reading about it at the time thinking, man, this is crazy. Like, why are they going to send something to an asteroid? Whatever. Nowadays I'm like, this is incredible, and it worked.
Yeah.
So
we will post links to the video of the broadcast, because they talk through the technology they've used and how it all happened. And it's just the engineering is crazy. How they even thought to do it that way is ridiculous. But they've made it work. Interestingly, they also pointed out there's a number of partners that were included within this project, including JAXA. And I happened to literally just Google JAXA and asteroids, and it turns out that Japan have actually done this kind of thing before.
Yeah, I think they have.
They've had 2 asteroids. As far as I'm aware, they've only had 2 asteroid landings, which is still cool, very cool. They did one quite a while ago, and that brought a tiny sample back of 0.001 grams in 2010. And there's their missions are called the Hayabusa. That was Hayabusa 1.
Yeah.
And Hayabusa 2 landed a couple of years ago on an asteroid, and it's actually going to be returning later this year, apparently, with a bigger sample. So maybe we'll have to talk about that at some point as well. But I wasn't aware of that. That's one of those things where the NASA stuff gets reported, but often other agencies get overlooked. Maybe their press departments aren't as good or whatever. But certainly in this country, I'd not heard of that before this happened. So that's also interesting. That I had no idea these things were happening. And you were aware of the mission. I wasn't aware of this mission. You happened to text me this week saying, "Oh yeah, the Asteroid Bennu thing's happening this week." I'm like, "What? What's this? Cool. Wow. What the hell?"
Yeah.
So it's I wonder how many other missions are going to come up over the next few years, which are going to blow me away, which I'm going to have no idea were even in the pipeline, and yet the amount of work that's gone into them, and the workload and the science the things we're going to learn from this. As you were pointing out, that one of the big things from this is there's the DART technology, which is part of what this is helping to test as well, which is a way we can defend against asteroids that may be coming to the Earth. But I'm pretty sure that there's technology involved in this mission to do with that as well, to learn more about that.
Yeah, there's actually NASA and I believe some international partners as well. There's quite a few asteroid-related type missions that are in the works. DART is called it stands for the Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And it is what it says it is. It's a test. And basically, in layman's terms, it means they're going to send up a spacecraft. And what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to bounce the asteroid kind of off its path. And it's going to basically try to see, okay, what happens if we try to do that? And the reason why that is really important, it sounds crazy and it sounds very science fiction. But the reason why this is so important and why these kinds of missions are really important is because of planetary protection, basically, which is it's kind of a relatively new field, but I think in our lifetimes we're gonna find that it's very important because I'm not trying to be like the movie Armageddon is real. It's a documentary, but in the I don't want to say unlikely because I'll jinx ourselves, but in the event that an asteroid gets a little too far away from the asteroid belt, it gets a little carried away from its mama duckling and ends up coming here, and we don't want it to hit here because it could cause cataclysmic problems on this Earth. There's they want to test this kind of technology to see, is it possible to send a spacecraft up, maybe with, something in it to perhaps, kick this asteroid away from us. So that...
At the end of the day, we just don't want to have to rely on Bruce Willis.
Yes. Yeah, he might be dead by then. We don't know. We might not have Bruce Willis.
We may not have Bruce Willis to save the day. So if that's the case, we need some technology. And you're right. It is good that they're thinking about it. And it does sound so sci-fi because obviously the movies Deep Impact, Armageddon. We've seen this in the movie. So it's pretty crazy that it's in real life. We are thinking about this stuff, and we for the good of the planet, hopefully. So
to preserve our species, which is important. To preserve the human species and other species as well.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful night, and I can't imagine what must be like in the offices where the team are right now, because they must feel over the moon. I'm sure there's lots of celebrations going on. And it looks like it's going to be an emotional time for them as well. Like with everything that's gone on this year, as you said, the fact that they've managed to get to this point and make this happen, and it happened first time. That's just incredible. Well done. Good game. Well played.
Yeah, I didn't want to be pessimistic, but whenever I see like landings and stuff, and I'm always kind of like, okay, if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. It'll suck, but it's not the end of the world. But I was very excited to see them get it right on the first time. Yeah. And tomorrow, obviously, our show doesn't come out until Thursday, but by tomorrow, which will be Wednesday, we're taping on a Tuesday, we should see some images from this approach. The reason why we're not seeing them right now on Tuesday is because of the data rate is the spacecraft is 200 miles. Yeah, 200 million, not 200 miles away. It's not in Cape Canaveral. No, the actual spacecraft is 200 million miles away. It's on the other side of the solar system.
It's crazy.
Right now. So, exactly. So the data stream it's sending back is really small because it's so far away from us.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get pictures tomorrow.
It was one of the fun things about watching the stream is at one point they said, well, of course it's already happened, but we won't know about it for another 10 minutes yet, because there was an 14. I think was it 14 or 18? I can't remember what it was. Something around that lag between the time things actually happen and the time we hear about it because of how far away it actually is. And that always blows my mind, that those kind of things. And the more we go to Mars, the more we're going to have to deal with that kind of stuff as well. I mean, it's all right when we go to the moon and it's only a few seconds, but
I'm wondering, I don't know, maybe that's something we should investigate in the future, is like, if there was a Mars mission, is there any way we can, now I hope I don't make myself look like a dummy, but I'm like, is there any way to possibly expedite communications from Mars to the Earth? And because I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in the communications realm. I know very little, but I'm sure there's got to be somebody out there who could maybe school us on it.
Yeah, so. that we could. Do you know what? That's one of the things I always took for granted with space travel, and it wasn't until I read Failure is Not an Option by Gene Kranz I appreciated how much work that they put in the early days just to be able to try and communicate with the spaceships as they were going around, the spacecraft as they were going around. And there was so many dead spots. There was huge chunks where the and even in the shuttle era as well, there was big periods where you didn't have communication with the shuttle, which is crazy. And you kind of take it for granted that they could talk all the time. The movies make out as if they could, but they really couldn't. But yeah, the interesting, while we talk about Mars, do you remember where I talked about that TV show Away that was on Netflix?
Yes, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, it's been cancelled already.
I heard, yeah.
It's really sad because I quite enjoyed it myself. But anyway, clearly not enough people watched it. But it'd be interesting, they talked about, they had the issues with the communications as well. And there came a point, they were able to do video calls up to a certain distance, and then the data couldn't travel that far well enough or something like that. So I wonder if that's actually, there's some truth in that. And I wonder whether those who are planning on going to Mars soon are thinking carefully, as you said, and are trying to expedite that process and speed up communications. Is there a way of having a satellite somewhere between us and them? Probably not. Or mirrors. I don't know how it works, but someone's got to be thinking about this, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I know I sound like a dummy, but
Me too.
like I read a book once, and it was ages ago. So I don't remember much from it, but it was about TDRS. It was about the tracking and data relay system, which first started in the early 80s with the shuttle, and I'm sure it was developed way before then. And I think I could get into this further, but I don't want to make everybody fall asleep. But I'm kind of like, is there a way to have a kind of that for other places? You know, like the moon or maybe, you know, the Mars. Is there any feasible way that this can be done so there's not communication outages? I'm sure there is, but that's not my background. And honestly, I don't know. So I could be making an idiot of myself just bringing this up right now. But I'm like, it's something I think about because I'm like, there's going to come a time, it might not be in my lifetime, where I think humans are going to have to start thinking about, okay, we're going to go to Mars. We're going to go to deep space. We're going to do all these things, and I honestly believe there will be a time when that's going to happen. And how are we going to talk to each other? You know?
Yes, very true. Very true. But it's been a fun night. It's been a very fun night.
Yes, it's been awesome.
There it is. There's the buster. There's Flag. We're here. You did it. It sure is. We are here.
So before we go, Emily, I've got to ask, have you managed to watch The Right Stuff?
Yes, I watched all 3 episodes. I want to give a shout out to an anonymous friend who actually gifted me a Disney Plus subscription.
Ah, beautiful.
Yes. So I want to give a massive thanks to this person because I have now been able to catch up on these episodes. I sat in bed, I think Friday night, and just binged all of them. I really enjoyed it. I really loved the kind of the aesthetic of the show.
Oh, it's so good, yeah.
I really thought it was good. I was very, I was nervous, but I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. So we'll see. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the rest of the season is just as good.
Yeah, what we'll do is when the season's over, there's 8 episodes. When it's over, so next month, we'll do a recap and perhaps talk a bit more in depth about our final thoughts on the season and maybe look at some of the things that they have got wrong, if they have got anything wrong. Interestingly, Collect Space...
Yes.
Every week they're doing an article on the episode where they're saying what was right and wrong about it, which I think is wonderful. So if you want to find it, go on the Collect Space website, and if you're really interested in that kind of thing and how accurate that show is being, then go check that out. But also, before we go, I want to shout out to an article written by Francis French, which was published on the Vintage Space page on medium.com this week. The article was called Gay Astronauts, A Final Frontier. It's a really wonderful article. We will obviously put a link in our show notes. It's a really fantastic article, which it was both heartbreaking and inspiring, but also was full of hope. And it tells a story of the history of astronauts who are gay, who have come out, and of which we only know of 3 right now. One is a current astronaut. 2 we didn't hear about until much later. And of course, Sally Ride, we didn't find out until the day she died. And it's all mentioned in this wonderful article. And then very shortly after that, Mike Mullane, a former shuttle astronaut who is in the same shuttle group as Sally Ride, posted the most beautiful post on the Space Hipsters Facebook page, including a letter that he wrote to Sally Ride's partner after she died, and expressing his own remorse for his behaviour back in the early days. And it's a theme that you will know about from his if you've read his book Riding Rockets. But that book and this post are just really beautiful and show his personal growth, and it's an example to all men, really. And I know I personally took a lot from that book in knowing how to talk about my past mistakes in sexism and homophobia, and both that article and his response to it were just wonderful. And you and I text about it shortly afterwards, saying, "Oh, that was emotional. Like, it was a wonderful thing that happened." So if check out that article, and if you are on the Space Hipsters page, try and find that post by Mike as well, which I think was posted by his wife. But try and find that; it's well worth reading. He
posted it under his wife's account. I don't think he has a personal Facebook, but he did post it in the group. It's really surreal. Mike Mullane posting on Space Hipsters about that.
Yeah,
this was somebody as a kid. I had their crew photo on my wall, like, yeah, STS-41D, woo, you know, and I had the liftoff photo of Discovery, and now he's posting in my group, which is nuts. But so it's very surreal. Yeah, I remember reading that. I think I was at lunch at my day job reading it, and I was like, is this real? Because it was just so, like, it hit me so hard. Like, oh, God, I'm about to get emotional talking about it, because I'm like, if you read Writing Rockets at the beginning of the book, you're like, man, this guy's a pig.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, when I first started reading the book, I didn't like him.
Yeah.
And obviously I finished the book and I was like, okay, he was trying to illustrate that, you know, when he showed up to NASA, he had never worked with a woman before.
Yeah.
But he did work with women eventually, such as, you know, Sally, and he did work with Judy Resnick. He flew with her on his first mission, you know, and he got to understand that, you know, women engineers were extremely competent and, you know, just as good, if not better than, you know, their male counterparts. When I started the book and when I completed the book, it was two different emotions.
Yes.
Because when I first started the book, I was like, I don't want to finish this. And, you know, because I hate to say this, I'm not trying to make this about myself, but when I first joined the Navy, I was the first woman in my plant. And that was kind of difficult. I mean, there were, I hate to say this because I love most of the men that I've worked with in my life. I'm very, you know, I've always had very close relationships with guys I've worked with, but it got very difficult. It was very difficult because there were the one or two men who were just like, look, I've never worked with a woman and I don't want to work with you.
Wow.
I mean, serious. And this was in the 90s. This wasn't in, you know, the 80s or the 70s, nothing. So that could be very hard because there were, unfortunately, you know, some men who had kind of a hostile attitude. And to hear him, you know, kind of admit, okay, I admit, you know, my attitude that I took was wrong. And, you know, I've worked hard to change it. To hear a man say that from the military for me was like, it aided me in my own healing from that experience. Being in the military and being like, you're the only woman here, you know, and kind of feeling like you're an other, you know, or something. And reading that for me was very moving. And I'm going to stop because I'm getting emotional.
It was a great post, and the book is wonderful. And as I said, it's something that perhaps all men should read because it does help you to understand how to address your past. Because I think a lot of men, we grew up in a world which told us we were better, even if we don't like to admit it. We have lived in that world, and as a result, we do have behavior and things that we have said and done in the past, and maybe still now, which we shouldn't have and we shouldn't do. And the only way of addressing it is by us acknowledging, oh, wow, we're part of the problem, even if we think we are good people. And often it's out of ignorance or just the circumstance of how we've been brought up in terms of societally brought up, but we can change it. And it's by people like Mike writing this book and making us, you know, showing, hey, I had this attitude once and it wasn't good. And actually I've learnt my lesson and I'm so much better. I feel so much better about who I am and the world as a result of the fact my outlook has changed. Exactly. And ultimately, the stupid thing about sexism is it requires men to talk to men for it to be fixed. That's the real irony, yeah. Because a sexist man isn't going to listen to a woman tell them.
You're right.
And that's one of the ironies about it. Yes, of course we need women to fight the fight as well, but men have got to play their part in this if we're gonna correct it. And Mike's book for me and my own personal journey within this was huge when I read that, in terms of me realizing, oh God, I've got a long way to go. And I'm a lot younger than him. Yeah,
like I said before, I don't want to make this too long, but reading his book for me and the situations that I went through, for me, it was kind of a healing experience to hear a guy say, okay, that's what I thought, and here's how I've tried to rectify that, and now I know that, you know, okay, this is why I thought that way. This was my line of thinking because of the way I was raised and the environment I was in. You know, and the military environment is very macho.
Exactly.
You know, it really is.
Yeah, watch the right stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like that. It's very like everybody's just competitive. And it's very masculine, and these guys are competitive with everybody, and then you arrive and, you know, you get a little more attention because you look different, and it's just, it can be very hard. And to hear, you know, Mike come clean about, okay, I was wrong, and to, you know, write a mea culpa to Sally's partner, and to know that, you know, this was something sincere. It was just, for me, it was a healing experience, because I'm like, wow, people can change and move on from that worldview.
Yep.
So that was very moving for me. Whew.
Yeah. and he's continuing to learn, as we all must do as well. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
But this all stemmed from that beautiful Francis French article, which I recommend everyone read as well. That was a really great article. And I'm sure he would appreciated the response that it got as well from Mike and others. Check that out if you haven't already.
What a ride, what a ride.
Another huge week in space. I hope you've enjoyed our little summary of everything. It really is an exciting time to be alive if you like space exploration.
Yeah, it really is. Thanks again to everyone who's listened, and especially to our Patreons who continue to support the show monthly. And you can join in over on patreon.com/space and things. And don't forget, you can also just go and get one of our t-shirts or make a donation on our website as well.
We'll be back next week to celebrate the space station.
And celebrate we will. But remember, in space, no one can hear you stream.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.